some time to himself, sit down, soak it up, and come up with what he needed to do.
What you want to do? What you want to take pictures? You from here?
Yeah, I'm from here. Yeah, I'm from here.
All right, so.
Oh, hell, y'all, let's go.
What's up with you?
I've already made my peace with it, because I know their energy. I was their energy. I know exactly how it's gonna turn out.
The city isn't breathing. Inside a silent fluorescent room, machines hiss and monitors tick while King Harris lies still under a web of tubes and wire. Outside, Atlanta gathers like a heartbeat. Candles lifted, voices low, strangers chanting his name until it breaks in their throats. Pray for King and justice for King don't just trend, they detonate, racing from block to block and screen to screen. Everyone feels it. This wasn't some dusty hallway scuffle you forget by morning. The story carries edges. It feels engineered. Word spreads that the cameras, the ones that never sleep, went dark at the exact moment King was jumped, not glitched, gone. No angles, no footage, no proof to trace the hands that moved in the shadow. And in that vacuum, a whisper leaks through like cold air under a door. A nurse, voice barely above a breath, says what nobody wanted to hear. This wasn't random, this was a setup. Someone wanted him gone. The line ricochets across the internet, and the silence inside the prison starts to sound like strategy. People start connecting dots that may not even be on the same page. If you believe the insiders, this wasn't luck, rage, or timing, it was precision. A hit disguised as chaos. The kind of move that doesn't just send a message, it erases the envelope it came in. Families huddle behind the glass while the city argues with itself, half praying, half accusing, and fully convinced something bigger than a fistfight just walked into the room. By now, the hospital lobby is a storm front. Security tightens, reporters circle, fans turn vigil into pressure, asking the question that keeps getting louder: who ordered the lights out? Because if the cameras didn't fail, but were made to fail.
Son, think I ain't spoke to my son? Think I ain't told my son, his mama, and his grandmama, his ass going to prison. If you goddamn keep that shit up, his ass going to prison.
Then someone chose violence and silence in the same breath. And that choice points to planning that knew exactly where King would be and exactly how to make sure the truth never showed its face. Inside the ICU, the rhythm of beeps becomes a countdown, each one a reminder that this night can still tilt either way. Outside, grief pulls people closer and suspicion pushes them over the edge. The setup theory stops sounding like a theory and starts feeling like the only story that fits. And just when the city thinks it's heard the worst of it, the grief at the hospital doors makes the whispers even louder. The first crack isn't in the story. It's in the family. Tiny folds in on herself in the corridor, crying out, "Why my baby? Why him?" As phones catch the moment and the internet turns heartbreak into headline. A few steps away, T.I. isn't a superstar anymore, just a father with nothing left to bargain. Cameras find him outside the ICU, tears cutting through the noise as he says, "I don't care about justice. I just want my boy to live." That single sentence pulls the world in close, and then the ground shifts again. Whistleblowers start talking. They don't speak loud, but they don't have to. The claim lands like a brick. Staff were told to look the other way, not a malfunction. An order. The camera, the same ones everyone trusts to see what human eyes miss, weren't unlucky. They were silent on purpose. If that's true, then the people sworn to protect the rules didn't just fail, they made space for the rules to be broken. The hallway rumors harden into a theory with teeth. The guardians open the door. Inside the ICU, time moves differently. Nurses whisper, doors ease shut. Family members stand so still it looks like the air around them is holding them up. Every beat feels like a verdict, and every pause feels like the world holding its breath too long. Meanwhile, outside, grief is starting to change shape. The vigil turns into a demand for answers. The question isn't what happened anymore, it's who allowed it. Then another wave hits. Word filters through that doctors are warning the family about the night ahead, that the next few hours could decide everything. It doesn't stop the crowd, it hardens them. Signs go up, voices get louder. The idea of a random brawl dissolves completely. If the cameras were dark by design, if the staff stood down by instruction, then this wasn't a slip, it was a script. And scripts have authors. T.I. steps out again, voice raw, face swollen from tears, and the sentence he throws at the sky splits the timeline. "If y'all don't protect my family, I'll burn this whole system down myself." Some hear a broken man, others hear a warning shot. Either way, the message is clear. The Harris family won't be quiet, even if everything around them has learned how to be. And then, as if the night needed one more fracture, a shaky recording begins to surface, allegedly from inside the facility, claiming the fight wasn't a fight at all, that a target had already been chosen. The clip isn't clean. It wobbles breathy and low, like someone whispering into a blanket, but the words slice through. "We were told to make it look like a fight. The target was King." It surges across timelines in minutes, stamped with disclaimers, stitched with reaction videos, looped and slowed and captioned 100 different ways. Authentic or not, it lands like a confession, and it rearranges the room. Suddenly, this isn't about tempers flaring in a yard. It's about orders, a mission, a name circled in red. From there, the theories split. One side points inside rival sets, old grudges, politics that start with a stare and end with a stretcher. The other side looks outward. Enemies with reach, strings pulled from beyond the wall, the kind of pressure that can dim cameras and clear hallways without an alarm sounding. Either path leads to the same conclusion. King Harris wasn't in the wrong place at the wrong time. He was selected. Then the rumor nobody wanted. In the darkest hour, he flatlined. Not for long, they say, just a heartbeat stolen and forced back by frantic hands in a room that refused to give him up. No official word, just a rush of messages and a crowd outside the hospital that gasps in unison. The moment hangs there, a terrible dip on an invisible graph, and the city realizes how thin the line has become. A few minutes later, another wave hits. A raw clip of T.I. at the edge of collapse rips through the feeds. Lord, take everything I own, just don't take my boy. No gloss, no PR sheen, just a father bargaining with the universe. It isn't content, it's a wound, and the internet can't look away. The hashtags swell again, but now they read more like prayers than posts. By morning, the narrative has new edges. If the audio is real, the attack was staged to look like chaos. If the cameras truly went dark by design, then someone wanted a story without witnesses. And if King was revived after slipping away, it means this isn't just a headline, it's a countdown. The city is done whispering, it wants names, and that's when the outside world starts talking back. Industry voices, cryptic posts, and one message that turns pain into fuel. It wasn't just fans anymore. The industry weighed in, turning the timeline into a chorus of riddles and side eyes. A well-known producer dropped a line that burned longer than a statement ever could. Play with fire long enough and the flames don't stop at you. No names, no tags, just a sentence that sent comment sections hunting for old receipts, buried interviews, and grudges with long shadow. Every beef from a decade ago got dragged back into the light, each one auditioning for motive. Then came the post that felt like a message, not a tape. A private account barely followed, threw out 7 words like a matchstick. The sins of the father find the son. No context, no follow-up. Minutes later, the page vanished, leaving screenshots to do the talking. Was it a troll, a plant, a warning? The uncertainty did the work on its own, and speculation hardened into storylines that had more branches than fact. Back at the hospital, theory gave way to logistics. Security tightened around the Harris family after threats surfaced online. Extra eyes at the doors, fewer visitors, more distance between the world and a room that felt like the center of it. Outside, the crowd wasn't thinning, it was multiplying, folding grief into demand. Posters read "Justice for King" and "The system failed him." And the chant hit a rhythm the city knew too well. Protect our kids, tell the truth, name the ones who looked away. T.I. stepped into the heat like a storm, face raw, voice frayed. He let the cameras have the only sentence he had left. Protect my family or I'll burn the whole system down. Some heard fury, some heard fear. Everyone heard the line in the sand. The clip spread, and for a night the culture split between those begging for calm and those arguing that calm is how stories get buried. What nobody could calm was the clock. Doctors were still measuring hours like they were miles, warning the family that time wasn't a friend and the whispers wouldn't die. If the cameras were cut, if the guards stood still, if an order turned a beating into a message, then whose message was it? Because messages have senders, and senders leave trails, even when they think they don't. By sunrise, the city felt heavier, not just sad, accusatory. Industry voices had stirred the pot. Cryptic posts had lit fresh fires. Security had closed ranks. Crowds had grown louder. And then a leak turned all that noise into a single brutal image of what might have happened in the dark. Morning brought leaks, not relief. Severe skull trauma, blows consistent with a padlock in a sock. Witnesses say guards watched, then moved late. Outside, candles turned into accusations. The system failed. King wasn't a slogan anymore. It was a verdict. Doctors warned of permanent damage, speech, memory, even paralysis. Tinies cried, they wanted to kill my baby, rippled through the halls. T.I., hollow-eyed and shaking, vowed, if y'all don't protect my family, I'll tear this whole thing down. Online, the blackout became the centerpiece. If the cameras didn't die, they were killed. A worker's whispered claim, let it play out, snapped into place beside the delay and the weapon, not neglect design. Security tightened, threats surfaced, and the family braced while the city demanded names, not sympathy. And just when anger peaked, a cryptic voice from the scene hinted there was more, much more than anyone was ready to hear. The voice came from a verified name with just enough history to matter and just enough distance to feel dangerous. Y'all don't even know half the truth. This wasn't random, this was planned. 7 seconds of audio, 2 lines of text, and the comment sections turned into crime boards. Some reached back to dusty grudges that never really died, tracing receipts from interviews and backstage flare-ups that felt small at the time and massive now. Others laid out a colder map, payoffs, blind spots, and the kind of institutional rot that doesn't show up on a headline until it wants to. 2 narratives marched side by side and refused to give way. On one path, this was rap history stretching its arms, old slights turning into fresh violence, names that can still fill a room pulling strings nobody can see. On the other, it was the system itself, bad actors with keys to the building, flipping switches and calling pauses, confident that paperwork could always outlast outrage. Either road ended at the same cliff. Somebody packaged chaos and shipped it to King Harris, and the return address was stamped in smoke. Atlanta felt it deep. The vigils multiplied, not just in front of the hospital, but across corners that know what it means means to hold a candle for someone too young. Pastors prayed into phone cameras. Grandmothers gripped posters like shields. Teenagers cried into their sleeves and promised they'd be back tomorrow. This wasn't clout, it was community weight. And the longer the authorities stayed quiet, the heavier that weight got. Then the image that stopped time. A photo leaked from inside. A father bent over his son's bed, forehead close enough for a whisper, eyes carrying a century of fear. The caption didn't matter. The picture said everything and took the air out of rooms around the world. T.I. wasn't an icon in that shot. He was a dad asking a question no one can answer. Can you hear me? Can you come back? News desks called it the most heartbreaking image hip-hop has seen. Fans printed it, framed it, and held it high like a promise to keep watching. Meanwhile, the theory threads kept branching. One mapped the blackout to a staffing shuffle that just happened to leave a blind spot. Another stitched together a trail of contraband rumors, arguing that King might have seen something he wasn't supposed to. A third dragged in a decade-old insult like a fuse no one realized was still burning. None of it confirmed, all of it plausible enough to keep the city up past midnight, scrolling for a line that would snap everything into focus. Inside the ICU, there was only the clock. Nurses traded shifts with faces that said too much. The family held hands and waited for a sign that didn't come. Every update felt like it was built out of air. Nothing strong enough to lean on, nothing soft enough to sleep in. And over all of it, the same sentence kept circling back like a storm. If this was design, who signed the blueprint? By dusk, the energy shifted from noise to countdown. Doctors told the family what no one outside wanted to hear. The next day decides everything. Not a week, not a month, a day. 24 hours that could tilt a dynasty toward recovery or throw a culture into mourning. Candles burned lower than brighter, as if each flame had its own answer to the same impossible question. And with the city perched on the edge of that clock, the story narrowed to a razor's edge. One final stretch where prayer fights with panic, truth fights with silence, and a family tries to hold the line while the world waits for sunrise. Morning didn't arrive, it crept in, the kind of gray light that makes a hospital feel colder. Doctors spoke in careful sentences, every word padded so it wouldn't shatter on the floor. The next 24 hours decide everything. It wasn't drama, it was a line in the sand. Hold steady or slip, heal or scar, live with a future or live with a void. Inside the room, time turned into sound, the steady metronome of a monitor, the soft drag of air, the whispers that families use when they're praying and bargaining at the same time. Tiny held King's hand and wouldn't let go, repeating the same promise because promises are anchors when facts won't hold. T.I. stood guard like a statue that remembered how to breathe, murmuring the words every parent says when there's nothing left to trade. I'm here, I'm not leaving, you hear me, come back. Outside, the vigil matured into something sharper, not just candles and posters, names, timelines, questions arranged like a caseboard. People weren't chasing theories anymore, they were demanding accountability. Who cut the eyes out of that hallway? Who told duty to stand down? Who turned a corridor into an ambush with a weapon that doesn't make noise but leaves echoes? If there was a plan, there was a planner, and if there was a message, there was a sender. Online, the current split and then braided together. One stream insisted this was the long shadow of old industry grudges finally touching the next generation. Another mapped out the unlovely math of corruption, favors, silence, and switches flipped by men who never expect to be named. A third stayed with the simplest truth, regardless of motive. This was a kid in a bed, while the adults in charge of safety chose something else. Midday slid past without headline. No miracle, no collapse, just the slow grind of maybe. A rumor flared, tiny movement, a reflex, but it faded under the weight of caution. The family learned not to chase flicker. The city learned how to wait without breaking. That's the part no post can capture, the discipline of hope. Then came the decision nobody wants to discuss out loud. If there's no improvement, doctors may raise the unthinkable. The mere possibility detonated through the hall. Tiny folded and came back up swinging with prayer. T.I. bristled into steel, voice low and final. You don't get to decide when my son's story ends. The words didn't threaten. They stood guard. By evening, the hospital's front steps looked like a church and a courthouse at the same time. Pastors led prayer circles. Organizers led chants. Reporters filmed both and tried to thread a sentence between faith and fury. The photo of T.I. bent over King's bed had already become an emblem. Now it felt like a vow. If there were hands guiding this from the dark, daylight was coming for them. Night returned, and with it that fragile quiet where every beat means more than it should. The clock kept moving because that's all clocks know how to do. And somewhere between 1 hour and the next, the story stopped sprawling and narrowed to a single point. A boy, a heartbeat, a city holding its breath for one more day. Theories can wait, debates can wait, even justice for one night can wait, because everything that matters is happening in a room with too much light and not enough space for fear. If he opens his eyes, the world changes one way. If he doesn't, it changes forever. And just beyond that door, a conclusion is forming about power, about silence, and about what a culture owes its children when the lights go out on purpose. Strip the rumors down to the wire, and what's left is simple and brutal. A son fighting for breath while a city tries to make sense of darkness that arrived right on schedule. Cameras that shouldn't sleep went quiet. Guards who should move stood still. A weapon that whispers did the screaming. Maybe it was old grudges with new targets. Maybe it was corruption measured in favors and flipped switches. Maybe it was both, because power rarely travels alone. None of it changes the room where this really lives. It's a father bent close, asking a question only his child can answer. It's a mother whose voice broke and kept speaking anyway. It's a family squeezed between prayer and paperwork while the world argues over motives it can't prove and messages it can't trace. Allegations swirl, timelines stretch, and the silence from the places that owe answers grows heavier each hour. But there's a truth louder than speculation. If this was design leaves fingerprints. Someone chose the blackout. Someone timed the silence. Someone decided a corridor could become a cave. Those choices carry name, and names can be found by pressure, by daylight, by a crowd that refuses to trade grief for forgetfulness. That's the debt power owes when it hides in the dark. For hip-hop, this isn't tabloid noise, it's a mirror. Fame can stack money, build empires, and flood stages with light. It cannot buy a guarantee that the rules will hold when someone decides they shouldn't. If a dynasty can be shaken by a switch and a weapon wrapped in fabric, then every fan who ever believed the culture could protect its own is right to demand more than thoughts and posts. They're right to want procedures that don't bend and cameras that don't blink when it matters most. And yet, even with all that weight pressing down, a thinner, stronger thread keeps pulling this forward. Hope, the kind that isn't flashy or naive, the kind that learns to breathe in rooms like this. If King opens his eyes, the story tilts toward healing and answer. If he doesn't, it tilts toward a reckoning that won't stop at grief. Either way, what began as one family's nightmare will finish as a test for a system, for a city, and for a culture that knows how to sing joy but must learn how to defend its children when the lights go out on purpose. Until the facts speak, let the pressure stay loud and the prayers stay louder. Remember the names that matter most. Hold the line on what's alleged and what's proven. Keep the questions sharp, the compassion sharper, and don't let the timeline turn this into another cold case with warm memories. If this moved you, stay with it. Share what matters, not just what trends. And if you want the follow-ups, the recoveries, the receipts, and the truth when it finally steps into the light, subscribe, drop a comment with what the system should answer first, and pass this to someone who won't let it fade.